People who live in the Guernsey area have been forced to leave their homes. Early yesterday morning, another CP train carrying crude oil derailed and caught fire. Now, this happened 2 months ago. Same visuals, another fiery crash, another oil spill. Greg Gormick is watching this. He's a rail consultant and a policy advisor, and he joins us on the line. Good morning, Greg.
Morning, Jennifer.
What was the first thing that you thought of when you heard about this second derailment?
Another example of about 60 years of failed federal transportation policy. This has been developing for years as successive federal governments have chipped away at the system that had the oversight and that had the institutional and technical knowledge to really police the railways and understand them. I'm not so much mad at Canadian Pacific because I understand where they're coming from. The same with CN. This is a failure of government policy, plain and simple.
Who does police the railways right now?
Well, supposedly the federal government, but on a declining basis. And this is all done under this system they've concocted in order to get out of spending money and hiring properly trained people to do the job. They call it the safety management system. I call it the safety mismanagement system, where the railways file their so-called incident reports, and if Ottawa has the time or the expertise or the inclination, then they may investigate what's filed in Ottawa by the railways. It's a broken system. It's plain and simple.
If Ottawa has the time, expertise, or inclination to investigate, if they don't, then what?
Then it just gets put in the dead file. I've gone through this myself. I reported something on a line down here in southern Ontario, and the very nice person who is experienced and has no time told me, well, if you go out and take pictures and get us the mileage figures and that, we'll put it into this file that we've opened on your behalf. That's rail safety management and oversight.
Wait, they asked you to go back and take pictures and get more details and what?
I didn't know I was the unpaid rail safety watchdog. I've done this before. I blew the whistle on CN when I saw a rail that was cracking right in front of the Woodstock station, passenger station. And what I got back was bafflegab. Oh, it's within the limits of our standards. And then a friend in Woodstock called me and went, hey, at work, the track gang's out there cutting out that bad section of rail. This is safety management?
Why would the railways themselves not be more inclined to pay more attention to rail safety?
Cutting corners because the government doesn't get involved, doesn't help them, leaves them to fight against other forms of transportation, which they will deny are being indirectly funded. We have a highway system that doesn't even repay 50% of its costs, and that's direct competition for the railways. So the railways have to get their capital from the private money markets, from Wall Street and Bay Street, and all those folks want is to see constantly increasing quarterly dividends. Safety costs. It also pays, but in the short term, you can cut corners, cut crews, cut train starts, cut back on maintenance. I understand where the railways are coming from, but this doesn't really serve the public interest, does it?
Well, and as somebody who lives in Saskatoon, and all of us see railcar after railcar after railcar just passing us at intersections on both the CN and CP lines, we see so much oil moving through our city.
I see it every day. I've got the CPR. I'm at mile 171.6 of the CPR Belleville subdivision. I watch the trains that you see going right through my backyard every day. And I've got to tell you, I finally have gotten, after all these years in this business, from a family whose roots go back to the early 1880s in railroading with CP and CN's predecessors, I get a little nervous when I hear the slack running in really hard. And I'm wondering, are those cars going to stay on those tracks?
Well, the federal transport minister has now ordered all trains carrying a significant amount of dangerous goods. You got to slow down. What do you think of that?
Well, I wouldn't say he's the most useless transportation minister we've had in 70 years, but he's certainly in the top 5. He's always great with coming out with things after the fact. We heard after the last one out there on the Sutherland subdivision that, we hadn't tightened up the rules over certain types of tank cars like they had done in the States. It's always after the fact. It's always finger pointing. Well, I can point fingers too, and all 10 of my fingers are pointed right up to Parliament Hill.
For people living in populated places like Saskatoon, in any kind of a center, you look at what happened and you go, please, please, please don't let it happen here. Who is in charge of making sure it doesn't?
The minister. It's the minister. It all goes back to the minister. And the only way to get around this, because they got a majority government, they can do what they like under our parliamentary system of government, we need an independent analysis of this. And the only body I can think of at this point that could do it would be the Senate Standing Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. I haven't had any indications that they're going to pick up the cause, but somebody outside of the rail industry with knowledge of the industry and somebody who's not under the thumb of the current government needs to be looking at this. How many more of these do we need, Jennifer? We've had 2 in your region right on the same subdivision. We had that terrible tragedy that killed those 3 brave railroaders at the foot of the big hill out in BC. We had Lac-Mégantic. How many more of these do we need for a wake-up call?
A number of people here in Saskatchewan are saying, see, this is why we need pipelines. That said, would we continue still seeing so much crude oil on trains?
Oh, the point is that this should be a perfect way to move this commodity, which I would point out when people start talking about, let's not move this stuff. Well, then stop using plastic, stop driving your car. This is a fact of life. Now, a properly run railway is very easy to police in terms of safety. It's a controlled corridor. But if the system is breaking down, if we're not getting people in there, we're hiring people in Ottawa now that we're losing a lot of the people with the institutional and technical knowledge. People are getting hired within these agencies who just happen to check off the right boxes, politically correct boxes on the application form. It doesn't fill me with a lot of confidence in this system. It's broken. And until they do a mea culpa, they can even point fingers back at previous governments, but do something, because they are undermining a form of transportation that has so much to devote to our society and could be doing more, but the system is broken.
Should we even move crude oil by train if these safety issues aren't fixed?
Yes, we should. We have to. Until we stop using these commodities. We can't move everything by pipeline, and rail is actually a proper way to do it in many cases because it's flexible. This is a changing. The energy market changes all the time. You build a pipeline, and suddenly that commodity flow is not there anymore. What do you do with the pipeline? Whereas with rail, you can move those assets. You can beef up each of those lines that you need to serve that market at that time, but not if it's not being done properly and safely. Safety costs, safety pays, but that's being lost in the equation.
Greg, it's a treat to talk to you. Thank you.
My pleasure, Jennifer. Bye.
Bye. That's Craig Gormick, a rail consultant and a policy advisor. Over to you. Would love to hear your thoughts on this derailment, on what Saskatchewan needs to do in terms of moving oil to market. How can we make it safer, especially when you watch those trains just loaded with tanker car after tanker car moving through our Saskatoon? I'd love to hear from you. Our email is saskatoonmorning@cbc.ca. Talkback 306-956-7456.